Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. Welcome to our webinar, How AI Agents and Bots Are Breaking Your Web Analytics and What to Do About It, brought to you by our friends at Snowplow. I'm Brian Mink, co-founder and president of Data Science Connect, the world's largest data and AI ecosystem for enterprise leaders. Today, we're excited to welcome hundreds of attendees from around the world to explore how agentic browsers and autonomous AI bots are beginning to reshape how traffic flows across the web, often without analytics leaders realizing it. Our featured speaker, Nick Stanchenko, Senior Product Manager at Snowplow, will break down what it really takes to measure and manage performance in an environment where synthetic sessions increasingly sit alongside human ones. Across traffic instrumentation, bot detection, governance, and cross-functional data alignment. Whether you're leading digital analytics, growth, or data platform strategy, this conversation will offer actionable guidance to help your team distinguish human from synthetic sessions, normalize AI-driven attribution, and protect measurable business value in an AI browsing future. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. To make this feel a little more in person, we suggest you add a photo to your profile and include your bio, LinkedIn profile, and other information you want your fellow attendees to see. Next, please take advantage of the Q&A and chat features in the right sidebar. Nick will be addressing your questions at the end of the webinar, so be sure to upvote the questions you'd like him to address. To engage further with today's topic, check out the poll question in the right sidebar. And finally, to learn more about how to account for AI agents and bots in your web analytics, check out the calls to action below throughout the webinar from Snowplow. Now, without further ado, I'm excited to hand things over to Nick Stanchenko from Snowplow. Welcome, Nick.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Nick, and I'm excited to be here. And because this event has data science in its name, I thought what a better way to start than talk about some numbers. So I believe we have a bit of a poll prepared. Okay, well, think about the answer, and I will now reveal the actual numbers. So 3 things here. The first one is, and this is, for me, it was quite surprising. Cloudflare says that 52% of HTML requests came from agents and bots. And this includes about 48% non-AI agents and 4% AI agents. So that's actually a lot and more than human requests, which is quite interesting. Another number we have here is from McKinsey, and this is just saying that they predict a lot of people will be spending money on things they find through AI-powered search and not classic search. So again, AI will play a big role in this. And the final number here just shows the tremendous growth of agentic traffic in the last year. So if we were to summarize this basically tells us 2 things. The first thing is that more and more browsing is done by agents and bots and not by humans. And the second thing is human browsing is also changing. They're not doing things the same way. They're not going to Google. They're going to chatbots and AI platforms to find things. And so the big question I have for you today is, can we accept these changes, but also do web analytics the same way as before? And this is obviously a leading question. The answer is no. What we did before often is we look at all these bots and agents browsing websites and we just go, well, let's just block them. And then we don't need to deal with any of this. So we put captchas, we put firewalls and things like that. The problem is you cannot really do this with agents because agents actually bring you users and they bring you revenue. So we need to rethink how we work with agents and bots on the web. And this in turn will also force us to rethink how we do analytics. So if before we just kind of swept this whole problem under the rug, now what we are proposing at Snowplow is kind of a 3-stage framework where you detect and you understand who the visitor is, whether it's human or agent. You model and analyze the behavior of humans and agents separately for different KPIs. And then you also adapt your website and content to whoever is browsing it. Now, I mentioned Snowplow, so just briefly about Snowplow and why we care about this problem. So we are a leading customer data infrastructure platform, and that means that we help these customers and a lot of others to collect behavioral data, analyze it, and also use this data in real time to enable real-time use cases like web personalization and so on. And so a lot of our customers care about this problem and they feel this problem on their actual data and analytics. And that's why we are also very invested in this. And over time, over the years, we've built a few tools, which I'll mention later when I go into specific sections. But just to give you an idea, we have SDKs to collect behavioral data on different platforms, websites, apps, mobile apps, TVs, Internet of Things device, and so on. We have a number of enrichments that add more details to this data. We have data models which will pivot this data to views that are useful for your actual analysis and analytics. And we can also provide context built upon this data in real time. So things like customer profiles. This can be used in chatbots or personalizations or other use cases. Now, let's get to the meat of this presentation. Suppose that you have a website and you have some JavaScript tracker snippet there, and it's going all into your analytics platform. And so if we look again at who is visiting your website, I've just said it's 50% bots potentially. It's not the same number for every industry and every website, obviously. So this diagram will not necessarily be to scale. But you will have humans, and you will also have agents and bots. And then within agents and bots, you will have scrapers, you will have AI tools, and you'll have search bots and other categories. Now, going back to your JavaScript analytics, what part of this behavioral data does it actually cover? So it obviously covers humans, otherwise it would be useless. It doesn't cover all the human behavior because you always have people turning off analytics and opting out. But it will also cover some of the agent and bot behavior. And that's because some of these agents and bots will run the JavaScript tracking code that you have on your website. And so this creates three separate problems, which I'll tackle one at a time. The first one is that of skewed analytics. You can see here we cover part of the scrapers, and a lot of these old school scraper bots will run your JavaScript. And so they will show up in your analytics and they will distort some of the key metrics that you have there. This is not necessarily a new problem, but I'll touch on that in a moment. The second problem is the AI traffic. And this is kind of the opposite of the first problem because lots of the newer AI agents don't run JavaScript. And so they are completely invisible to the analytics that you have. And we'll talk about why that is a problem. And finally, you can see these are two separate circles. We are used to thinking about sessions being either human sessions or agent sessions. But that's no longer true because you have agentic browsers where within the same session, you could have a human and an agent browsing your content. And so this is the third problem that we'll talk about. Now, there is a famous comic about people getting excited about this shape. So set theorists and astronomers are both interested in this sort of intersection graphic, and you can add Snowplow there. Anyway, the first problem, the skewed metric. So this is, as I said, this is not really a new problem. Bots have existed on the web since forever. It is getting a bit different now because the agents are on the rise, and you might want to treat them differently. So the problem is that you have human data and you also have bots and scrapers and all kinds of things visiting your website. And this is all kind of tangled together in your analytics data. And on the one hand, you want to measure human bounce rate, human click-through rate, conversion rates. You want to focus on key business metrics that are relevant to human visitors. However, if you look at the bot portion of your visitors, they have very different values for this metric. So for example, bots could be almost always just bouncing. So they just visit once and then they switch to a different proxy or something and you never see them again. You never see that session again. And they also don't really tend to click on things or convert. And so when you merge these two data sets together, you get numbers that are not really accurate. That's what you get in this tangled mess. So you get page views which are too high because they're also counting with all the bot views. You get bounce rates that are too high because, again, for the same reason. And then opposite to that, you have click-through rates and conversion rates that are very low because, as I said, bots and agents will not click on things or convert. So what is the solution? The solution is that we need to remove this from the data, not block them from the site, but remove them from the data that we are analyzing. And we can do this based on three key pillars. The first one is who they appear to be. The second one is where they come from. And then the third one is how they behave. And these are arranged kind of in order of how difficult it is for a bot or agent to fake this information, but also in order of how difficult it is to look and analyze this information. So we need to find some sort of balance here. Now, the first one is who bots appear to be, and this is quite straightforward. So if something tells you that it's Googlebot, it's probably Googlebot. If you can look at the different attributes of the browser and you can see that there are some signs of automation, that's probably automation. Also, if you find any strange browser characteristics like unrealistic device sizes or others, this is also a good sign that this is a bot or scraper of some kind. Unfortunately, this doesn't really work in reverse. So if someone tells you that they're just regular Chrome, that doesn't mean that it's regular Chrome. It can be still a scraper. So you can use this to detect bots that are well behaved and that tell you who they are, or also bots that are kind of sloppy and they didn't hide very well who they are, but it doesn't work with more advanced bots. The second thing we could look at is where bots come from. And by where, what I mean is the IP address. You could look at the IP address as it is, or what we recommend is to look at what is called autonomous system number. So each system on the internet is assigned such a number. And you can see, for example, AWS has a few numbers, DigitalOcean. These are both cloud service providers. So the reasoning behind this is that if you see someone browsing your website and their IP is from a regular internet service provider, it is probably a human. Whereas if you see someone pretending to be just a regular browser, but coming to your website from a cloud provider like AWS, that's probably some sort of bot. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't work very well either because VPNs exist, and actually this could be just a VPN node. And so this could also be a human. Now, the final way that, that you could look at this is how bots behave. And this is much harder to fake, but it is also trickier to analyze, as I said. One sign of it could be, for example, if there is any sort of human activity on the page. So if you can figure out that someone is moving the mouse a lot or scrolling the page, or in case of mobile devices, tapping on the page, then you know that this is potentially a human user, or more likely to be a human user. Conversely, if you see someone not doing any of those things and they are browsing a lot of pages in rapid succession and often with regular intervals, this is more likely to be automation. Of course, bots can also adopt some of these behaviors, but it's not actually in their interest because they want to analyze content very efficiently. And if you stop and you start doing other things while trying to do that, you're not really achieving the goal of the automation. So we can look at behavioral patterns like this. I want to caution here that you might not be able to filter out all of the bots downstream, and potentially some upstream measures might still have their place, so captures are not going anywhere, but you should still clean up your analytics. And how do we do this? We basically combine all the different signals that I just mentioned. So information that we have about the browser that we can collect client side, the user agent, which you can kind of trust sometimes, the IP address, and the behavior during the session. So Snowplow is well positioned to do those things. We have, as I mentioned, the tracking SDKs that collect all this data. We have built-in enrichments that will classify the user agents and IP addresses for you. We have the data models that will separate the data, and we also have something called Snowplow signals, which allows you to build real-time profiles of the behavior, and you can do some more advanced things. But I'll show a demo of that later. Okay, now the second problem is the invisible AI. So this is, as I said, the opposite of the first problem, where a lot of the bots are running JavaScript and they're showing up in your analytics. Here, the problem is the inverse. Instead, the AI agents are not actually running JavaScript, so they don't show up in your analytics. Now, AI traffic, as we saw in one of the first slides, it is a major referral source, and it's predicted that it will be like the main referral source. So it is important to understand where users are coming from and what underlies all of that. But I think it's best to explain this with an example. So let's say that at some point, AI agent will visit your website and it's going to add the specific page on your website to their training data set. And in the case of ChatGPT, you will see this as an agent called GPT bot. Now, at some later point, maybe 1 month later, maybe half a year later, let's say that the user asks something related to your site, and the agent is going to visit your website again to check the current content. This will be a different user agent. It will be ChatGPT user. And then finally, the user likes what they are seeing from the AI search, and they will actually come to your website and do something. And at this point, you will see the user referred by chatgpt.com through the UTM source parameter. Now, the problem is that in your typical analytics solution, what you will see is the top portion, the tip of the iceberg. You will not see this portion because these agents do not run JavaScript. And I sound like a broken record. This one is just a regular user request. So of course, you will see it. This is a problem because ideally you want to optimize your content for AI to bring more users to it. And so you would be asking questions like, which AI platforms are active on my site? Which of these platforms bring the most users? Which platforms should I invest in, or which should I not even bother with? And also in terms of content, what works well and brings the most users, and which pages do not work well and which ones they need to improve. So if you don't have the data about how AI actually navigates your website, then you cannot do this sort of optimization. Again, disclaimer, AIEO, AI engine optimization, kind of the counterpart to search engine optimization, or what happens when you put all the vowels in the same initialism. This goes well beyond analytics, so I'll not be covering that today. But again, I want to make the point that making your analytics clean and reflecting everything in your analytical data is the first step to any sort of optimization. Okay, so I mentioned many times that these AI agents do not appear in web analytics. So is there any way to get that information? And the answer is yes. If you look at your server logs, they will include everything that visits your pages because this doesn't rely on any JavaScript. And so you will see GPT bot visiting for training. You will see the OpenAI search bot visiting for search, and then the ChatGPT user visiting to check the latest version of the page. And finally, you will also see human users. Now, this is not specific to OpenAI and ChatGPT in any way, it's just an example, but you will have the same sort of breakdown with Perplexity and other platforms. Okay, so what now? You have server logs, you have your analytics. How do you actually combine these things? One way to do this is you have your analytical platform, you keep it as is, you inject the typical events that you would already get with the client-side tracking, with JavaScript tracking. And then you get another platform specifically for AI analytics, and you ingest server logs there. And so this works, but the image of silos might lead you to the conclusion that I don't really like this approach. And I don't, because what if you want to ask a question that requires data from both of these platforms? So let's say, for example, I want to know how active are AI platforms, which is data that lives here, are on pages that have the most user engagement. So where users click the most things, scroll the most, browse the most. This is the information that typically lives in your traditional web analytics platform. And so they can kind of touch each other, but not really, because they're separate platforms, and it's quite cumbersome to answer questions like this, which you will invariably want to answer. So my proposal is use a single platform. Pick a single platform and use it as a single source of truth, and ingest both data sources there. So the client-side events from your website, but also the server-side logs. And that way you get a complete view of users, bots, AI agents, and whatever else is there. And then you can pivot the subsets of this data to different analysis that you want. So you can have user behavior analytics, and you can also have AI analytics. and you will be answering questions like which platform visit your website and so on and so forth. But also, you can run whatever query you want because all the data is in one place. And probably comes as no surprise that Snowplow is a good fit for this model. So we load all the data in your warehouse or data lake. Again, we have the tracking SDKs for client side, but also server side if you choose to just implement tracking on your server side instead of going to your CDN platform. We also integrate with CDN providers if that's what you prefer to do. And the Snowplow platform was actually built from the ground up, and I cannot emphasize this enough. It was built from the ground up to handle data of different types within the same platform. And we achieved that by having well-defined schemas for different events that can be all validated. And if you try to send something with the wrong fields, it will be rejected. Well, not rejected, but it will go to a separate place for your analysis where you can fix it up. And yeah, we also have data models to do all those pivots that I mentioned. Okay, this brings us to our third and final problem, and this is a problem related to agentic browsers. Now, I already mentioned that historically, everyone has assumed that a session is either a human session or an agent session. But now this is not true because you have things like agentic browsers. So here I have a quick demo. If you haven't used an agentic browser, this is Comet, one of them. And I just asked it to book a flight for me. Spoiler alert, it doesn't get to actually book the flight, but you can see I asked it, book me a flight in London for next week. And it just takes control over the browsing, and it goes and it pre-fills all the different fields for me. And if I let it run sufficiently, it will probably book the flight as well. So this gives you an idea of what the agentic browser is, hopefully. And now for the challenge. So within the session, you can have a human going to a website, trying to book a ticket, going through your meticulously crafted experience with all the different pop-ups and promotions and things you want the user to click. But then instead of doing that, they just ask the web browser that they're using to book the ticket. And all the browser sees is just text and code. It dismisses all the pop-ups. It just gets to business. It books the ticket, and then the user comes back and enjoys their flight. So this is a very different model of browsing, and this is relevant not just for analytics, but also for the overall experience of your website. Sir Ian McKellen summarizes how this works very well.
If we were to draw a graph of my process, of my method, something like this, Sir Ian, Sir Ian, Sir Ian, action, wizard, you shall not pass, cut. Sir Ian, Sir Ian, Sir Ian. Okay.
Yeah, so different things happening within the same session. And so all our metrics are wrong again, because if we are looking, for example, at engage time, it will be good for the user part of the session, but it will be probably 0 for the agent part of the session. But more importantly, we're also losing control of how these agents are consuming our content because they will do whatever they want, and we optimize the website for human users. The good news is that this problem is not that dissimilar to the problem of bot detection, except it's more complicated. And we have to go straight for the advanced analysis of behavior. So we can look at whether there is human activity, and we can also look at how these agents are navigating between pages. They don't navigate the same way that humans do. Again, Snowplow, I promise this is my final pitch. Snowplow is well suited to this problem because we have the tracking SDKs. And actually, one thing that you should know is that these new agentic browsers, they seem to be all very much focused on privacy. So it is good that we provide first-party tracking, which is less likely to be blocked by privacy-centric browsers. We can build real-time profiles of the behavior and use that to distinguish between humans and agents. and we can segregate the sessions into human and agentic constituent parts. But more interestingly, and this is related to what I said about how we need to change the experience that we provide to users, we can use these real-time profiles to not just observe what's going on, but also to act and adapt the behavior of the website. And so I want to leave you with this demo that I prepared, which hopefully shows what that might look like in the future. Hi there. Today I want to talk about agentic browsing. An agentic browser is a browser you just tell, go to this page, fetch this content and summarize it for me, and it does everything while you sit back, relax, and have a coffee. Now, this is great for the users, but raises some questions. What if the website's business model relies on human interaction? What happens to key metrics like engaged time and click-through rates, which traditionally assume humans clicking or not clicking on things? In this demo, I'll show how a website might intelligently adapt depending on who is browsing it, a human or an agent. Behind the scenes, we'll be using Snowplow event tracking and Snowplow signals. This is a great combo because not only do we make the website adaptive, but we also get complete analytics. What were the individual page view events, and which parts of the sessions were driven by the human or the agent? Let's get started. For this demo, I've built a fictitious resource dedicated to unusual sports. You can see it has a bunch of articles on made-up competitions which may or may not have been written by AI, but that's beside the point. At the top, I've added a little widget that tells us who the website thinks I am. This obviously wouldn't be present on a real website, but for the demo, it's really handy to see what's going on under the hood. You can see I'm classified as a human at the moment. This will remain the case as long as I browse the website normally. Notice that as I navigate from one page to another, I move the mouse, scroll as I read. This is what humans do. All of my actions generate Snowplow events, and the website's backend uses Snowplow signals to build a real-time profile of how much engagement I've shown for each page visited. Then it comes up with a probability of me being a human. Now let's see what happens when I ask the agentic browser to navigate the website for me. Here's the assistant. Visit all the articles and summarize them for me. There you go. At this point, the browser takes control of the page. We'll speed up the footage a little bit as it prepares for the task, but already you can see it approaches browsing very differently. There's not much wandering or scrolling. The agent just processes the content of the page and it knows where to go. After the agent visits a few pages without exhibiting any human-like interaction, the website flags it as not human. Now, this is where things get interesting. Since we detected the agent, we can choose to render the content differently. For example, we can shorten the article to just the summary and try to force the human to intervene to see the full content. In other words, we set our own terms for how the agent intermediates between our website and the user. But we don't just want to pay attention to the transition from a human to an agent. We also want to know when the human returns. For this, I've set up a Snowplow signals intervention, a real-time trigger that we'll see what happens. I'll take back control and once again browse the website normally. Once the website is certain that a human is back at the helm, it introduces me to its own agent, an expert on unusual sports. Would it be able to help me better than a generic browser agent? Probably, although this one is just a mockup. By now, we've seen a few ways that a website might adjust to agentic browsing. But you might be wondering, can we quantify how much of that is going on? Can we analyze the data? The answer is yes. Because we are using regular Snowplow events, all the data will be in the warehouse. Looking at Snowplow UI, I can see individual page view events supplemented with the classification score at the moment. And because all the mouse movements and scrolling activity is recorded, I can adjust the logic and compute a better score in my data model post factum. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. All right. So this brings the presentation to a closure, and I just want to summarize the three main things that I mentioned today. So the first one is the problem of the skewed metrics, and the solution is to untangle your users from agents and bots. The second one is that of invisible AI, and you have to surface the hidden AI traffic if you want to optimize for AI and have your content stay relevant in the age of agentic search and things like that. And finally, you have to get ready for agentic sessions. And I think the agentic browsers are really gaining huge popularity now. We just saw Chrome released its agentic browsing feature, so it will probably just get more agentic from this point onwards. Okay, so now I did see there were a few questions, and I think actually I have a slide that might cover partially some of them. So I'll just start to go through them. Okay, so would there have to be any transition from a silo format to using Snowplow, or does it integrate automatically? Okay, so first thing, I do have a slide here. We do have a lot of companies coming from other analytics platforms, and just happen to have this QR code if you want to learn more about that. But the bottom line is there will be some things that are seamless, and there are some things where you might need to reorganize how you do things to reap the benefits. So for example, with Snowplow, you own your data. We provide the data into the warehouse or lake that you give us. And this is actually different to a lot of other analytics solutions where they would silo the data in their platform. So obviously you would need to provide the warehouse, but that's the benefit of it really, because then you can query whatever you want and the data always stays under your ownership. Okay, another question. You mentioned that existing analytics solutions can already attribute users to AI referrals. Is this logic consistent across different AI platforms? So let me go back to where I talked about that. So I wish the answer was a resounding yes, but it isn't, unfortunately. So I did say here that we can see the tip of the iceberg in a typical analytics platform. The users referred by different AI platforms. Now, the problem is that different platforms refer users in different ways, and actually some of them don't refer users at all. Some of them will use the UTM source, like ChatGPT here. Some of them will set the refer header, which ChatGPT also does. Some of them will just set one but not the other, or vice versa. And some of them will set both, and some of them will not set any of them. So it is a bit of a mess right now. And my hope for the future is that as the AI platforms become more mature, they will have to implement proper attribution, because if they want to start, for example, having contracts, let's say with media companies for accessing their content, they need to provide something in return. So they need to say how much of an audience they are bringing. But yeah, right now, this is not super consistent, and we are closely looking at that and checking how we can provide this information more easily to our customers. Okay, another question. Is AI agent able to track data from multiple windows? I think this is probably about the agentic browsers, so I'll assume that. If not, feel free to correct me in the chat. Okay, perfect. So I think this depends on the browser. There are also some of the AI agents that are kind of browser-like, but not really. For example, Operator from OpenAI, where you can ask it for stuff and it will go fetch things, but it's not really a browser. In terms of the browsers, as far as I know, the ones that I've used, they stay in the current tab, but also they don't need to stay within a specific site when you ask them something. So for example, you can ask them for a comparative analysis of prices across different marketplaces, and it will go and visit those different marketplaces, and then it can consolidate the information from what it has seen on different websites. So not necessarily two tabs that are open side by side, but because you can sequentially visit different things, it's basically the same. Yeah, so it can definitely consolidate information from different sources. Okay, I think there might not be more questions unless I'm missing them. So I guess we'll wrap it up here. Thank you everyone again.
Thanks, Nick. Excellent presentation. If you missed any of today's webinar, or you want to rewatch anything, you can refresh this page right after the webinar concludes. and the video will be available here. We also are going to post the video recording to our YouTube channel tomorrow, so we'll send out a link to that as well, and make sure you scan that QR code if you want to engage with Snowplow after the webinar. So special thank you again to Nick for an excellent presentation, and to Snowplow for making this excellent webinar possible. And we'll see all of you again next time. Thank you.
Thank you.